Welcome to another episode of the Prime Human podcast, where we explore the science on how you can live, work, and achieve beyond average. I'm your host, Dr. Miguel Damas, and today I want to explore the difference between depression and burnout and what it may mean for you. But before we get into it, just a quick disclaimer. This episode, as always, is only intended for educational purpose. It should not be seen as medical advice in any way, shape, or form. So please do consult with your physicians before you do anything on your protocol, especially if you are taking any pharmaceutical drug. And before we jump into the episode, if you want to have access to my Prime Stress Protocol ebook, it's a 30-page ebook, fully referenced on the strategies that I use and that I advise my clients and patients to deploy to mitigate the stress they feel. You can just go to primehumanperformance.com/stress protocol and have access to it. So again, primehumanperformance.com/stress protocol. And now let's get into today's topic. The reason I wanted to record this episode was because of an appointment that I had this week, and it reminded me how frequent and how unfortunate it is that highly driven founders and executives are misdiagnosed with depression when they are not depressed. So the story of this person is quite straightforward. She's an senior executive working on a multinational company, and as you can expect, she has high levels of pressure. She's highly driven. She's always wanting to achieve their goals and surpass them, lead her teams. And as with most companies, the end of the year involves higher pressure to deliver before the end of the year. And she told me that the end of last year was pretty rough. Amongst all the pressure she was having, she had a personal family crisis, family health issue. After dealing with that acute short-term problem, she just felt like her body just gave up. She felt immense levels of fatigue. At some point, she could not find the energy to get out of the couch. She was just, in a word, she was blocked. She could not do anything. So she went to her regular doctor, GP, who I'm assuming diagnosed her with a depression because the doctor gave her an antidepressant, gave her sertraline, which she found did nothing good or bad. She felt the same after taking the drug. Her sleep was still a little bit off. She was waking up tired. She felt that her system was not recharging. So after 6 weeks, when she returned to the GP and saying that the drug had no impact, she was prescribed a benzodiazepine to help with sleep. And she felt the impact immediately. She's starting to sleep more, that's true, but she started to wake up even more tired, sluggish, and she felt that her brain was being held like in a strain jacket, which for a highly driven, super focused individual is one of the worst things that anyone can feel, feeling that the capacities are just being reduced. And unfortunately, that's pretty common. I mean, there was a paper published, like a systematic review published in 2023, who looked into the impact that benzodiazepines had on sleep. And they found that indeed taking these drugs would increase sleep, but would mainly increase light sleep, and that would reduce deep sleep and rapid eye movement sleep, which are the most important part of our sleep, which then led to worsening executive performance, worse concentration, worse memory, and even increase in body weight. So it's not that uncommon that people take benzodiazepines to improve sleep, but at the end of the day, they will get less efficient sleep, and the net result may not be a positive one. So that's how she came to me. And after listening to her story and after looking at her, I get a weird feeling. I mean, let's call it a sixth sense that she was not depressed and something else was going on. So I asked her the one question that I always ask to try to differentiate whether someone's having a depression or something else. And the question is, do you feel that you do not want to do anything, or do you feel that you want to do things, but your body and your system do not react? This simple question allows me to differentiate if someone is being depressed or someone is not being depressed and something else is going on. And I've seen the look of even happiness of executives and founders listening to this question and immediately understanding that someone is really getting to the bottom of it. Because without hesitation, she looked at me and said, no, it's the second option. I want to do stuff and my body doesn't react. And that I knew that she was not depressed. She was burning out. That's the simplest way, and maybe, obviously, simplistic way, but it's the simplest way that I have to differentiate if someone is depressed or burning out. And the reason is that at face value, the symptoms between a depression and a burnout are very, very, very similar. Both will have very similar symptoms: low energy, increased fatigue, changes in sleep pattern, either more sleep or less sleep, changes in appetite, either more appetite or less appetite, changes in executive function, concentration drops, efficacy drops, it's like you have starting to have brain fog and inability to think. Those are very, very similar in burnout and depression. Let me give you the actual diagnosed criteria for depression. Amongst these 9 symptoms, you have to have 5. Depressed mood most of the day, nearly every day. Markedly diminished interest or pleasure in all or almost all activities most of the day, nearly every day. Significant weight loss or weight gain, or decreased appetite or increased appetite. Insomnia or hypersomnia. Psychomotor agitation or retardation, nearly every day. Fatigue or loss of energy. Feelings of weakness or excessive or inappropriate guilt, diminished ability to think or concentrate or indecisiveness, and recurrent thoughts of death or recurrent suicidal ideation. These are 5 of these qualify for a depression. And as you can see, they are very similar to the 3 main symptoms of burnout, which are feelings of energy depletion and exhaustion, increased mental distance from one job, or feelings of negativism and cynicism related to one's job, and reduced professional efficacy. They overlap significantly. So that's why, at face value, these 2, let's call these 2 shops, have the same front end. They are very similar. But behind the scenes, what happened inside the shop is fundamentally different. Fundamentally different. The process that leads to a depression is a fundamentally different of a process that leads to a burnout. While one is, for the most part, or have a big component of mental health issue, the other one is not a mental health issue. And on a previous podcast, I've went on and on and on explaining why it's not a mental health issue and why it's not a professional workplace chronic stress problem. And actually, the story of this patient explains both. The last drop in the bucket that led to exhaustion was actually a family event, not a professional event, was a family event on top of long-term workplace stress, if you want. But the last drop was a personal health issue or family health issue. And the second, the strategies to improve mental health with the drug, with a very common antidepressant, did not work because it's not a mental health problem. Burnout is not a mental health issue. Burnout is a metabolic problem. It's a whole body physiological problem that also will present itself with changes in the mind, but also in the brain, in the body. We'll have changes in immune function, hormonal balance, circadian rhythm, self-functioning, energy production, mitochondria. That's the whole body that is affected in a burnout, not our mental health. So by asking this very simple question allows me to try to differentiate between things that have such similar symptoms. But on a depression state, most people, and again, I know that I'm being simplistic here, but still it helps. In a depression state, most people will not want to do stuff. In a burnout state, the person knows I want to do things and I know that my body, my brain is preventing me from keep on going. And the differentiation between these 2 states, making sure that we are not misdiagnosing one for the other, is critical, not only because of the problem of a misdiagnosis, but also because the treatment for depression does not work on. As I explained with my patient, she took antidepressant and felt nothing. And yes, I know that an antidepressant may not work and we need to adjust the dosage or change it completely in the first 6 weeks, and you should take the treatment for 6 months to avoid or minimize a relapse. I know that. But that's if we are talking about a depression, not a burnout. Following this, I wanted to do a proper review on the evidence of the usage of antidepressants in a burnout state. I wanted to answer a very simple question. Do antidepressants help in the treatment of burnout? So not only did I went myself, but I also deployed ChatGPT, Gemini, Consensus app to try to find the answer to this question. Do antidepressants help in a burnout? And I may have missed something, but I didn't find any conclusive data showing that taking antidepressants will help with a burnout. Did it surprise me? No. From the people that I've helped over the years battling and going through burnout, I never met someone telling me that an antidepressant was extremely helpful. I found, though, a very interesting article that I want to dissect and share with you, and I'll put the link in the description so you can have a look if you want. It was an article published in 2025, and what they did was trying to find what were the strategies that people that were either burning out or burned out used to get better, and then how much helpful they found it. On the list of the things that people try to improve their health and recovering from burnout, there were 25 strategies. The strategies that most people use to improve their burnout and the sensation of being burning out were improving sleep and resting more, or going for a walk. This was 62% of people. Then talking to a family member, 59%. 51% said that tried to take some time off. 45% was consulting a healthcare professional. And then the list went on and on and on, including exercise and mindfulness and taking antidepressant, which only 31% tried. Then they went to ask how much helpful did you find it? And this is very interesting. The top 3 strategies that people found helpful were quitting the job, making a major change in their lifestyle, and also consulting a healthcare professional. Not necessarily being prescribed anything, but consulting a healthcare professional. And we're talking here about 80% of people found these strategies to be helpful. There's a lot of nuance into this study, and I found it very interesting. And actually, the reason why I'm sharing it with you, because it allows us to understand a little bit more into or support this idea that burnout is not a mental health issue. So what they did was dividing the people in 2 groups. Either you are burning out or you are burned out. And then they went to see what were the strategies that people found to be more helpful. On the people that were burning out, making lifestyle changes, going for walks, doing yoga was seen to be more helpful than quitting the job. And in the same group, doing exercise other than yoga and other than walks was seen as helpful as taking an antidepressant drug. In the burnout group, quitting job was the most helpful strategy, but making lifestyle changes was very, very close, was seen as almost as helpful as quitting the job, which is very interesting. But then in the burnout group, these are the list of strategies that were seen to be more helpful than taking an antidepressant. Consulting a healthcare professional, going for walks, doing yoga, taking some time off, increasing exercise, going on a relaxing holiday, talking to a family member, doing some relaxation therapy, taking some medication other than antidepressants, meditating, starting new hobbies or activities, and improving rest and sleep. All of these were reported to be more helpful than taking an antidepressant. All this combined with the fact that I didn't find convincing evidence that taking an antidepressant will help burnout, and that we have so many other strategies that are seen more helpful than taking antidepressant. For me, it's a very, very strong evidence going against the theory that burnout is a mental health issue. Again, it's not, it will never be. And as long as we see it as only a mental health issue, we'll still have ramping levels of burnout amongst very high-driven, very focused, very goal-oriented people. So if there's a lack of evidence supporting these treatments, why are they being prescribed? My point of view, it's due to 2 reasons. First, indeed, being burned out will increase the risk of developing depression down the line. Taking antidepressant will reduce the risk and the severity of depression if that happens. And second, because burnout is still seen as a mental health issue, therefore it should be treated as other mental health problems, which involve, amongst other strategies, antidepressants. All that I share with you goes against the idea that burnout is a mental health problem. It's not, it will never be. And that's actually why strategies like starting hobbies, improving sleep, improving relaxation, changing lifestyle are seen more helpful than taking medication, for instance. And it's also incredibly important to understand that seeing burnout not as a mental health issue and not something that will be caused by workplace stress is incredibly liberating for founders and executives and highly driven people that are pursuing their goals and their dreams, are on a mission to deliver something either from themselves, for their teams, for their families, or for the world. It's incredibly liberating. You do not need to quit your job. You don't need to change your project. You do not need to change your mission. The simple fact is that if you replenish your battery, your metabolic battery, if you find a way to create a system and a protocol that is able to recharge your battery, give you the tools and the raw materials and the environment that you need to thrive, that you can do it. And I found this to be extremely liberating. And that's actually why I saw the spark in the eyes of this patient when I explained her that what she had was probably not a depression, more likely than not a burnout. This is liberating. This is really, it is. I've seen it happen again and again. You don't have to change the path that you're on. If we find a way to increase the resilience of your system, the metabolic resilience of your system, to really understand what are the pitfalls and limiting factors, metabolically speaking and physiologically speaking, and obviously it will include a lot of areas. But if we find these limiting factors, if we really understand what's going on and we create a proper system to increase your resilience, your ability to keep on going, then you will either not burn out, recover much faster, or keep on thriving and not even feeling that you are just crumbling. And that's what I want to share with you right now. What are the 4 different areas that I look into with my clients to understand how resilient they are and how close to burnout they are? Area number 1 are signs and symptoms. So the 5 questions that I ask are: do you wake up recharged and ready for the day? Or do you wake up sluggish and you need coffee just to go from absolutely no function to barely function? And then the second coffee is the one that will get you the edge. That is the first question. The second question is if you have stable levels of energy throughout the day, or if you have a big dip in energy early afternoon with a second wind at the end of the day. The third question is whether or not you wake up in the middle of the night, usually 3 to 5 hours after you fall asleep, and then the second part of the sleep is really not effective and you wake up not feeling that rested anyway. Fourth is if you find that your sharpness is being lost. You take more time to make decisions, you find hard to concentrate, hard to focus, like you have some sort of brain fog, or if your mind is just being limited on a strength jacket. And then fifth is if you feel that you don't want to do stuff, or if you want to do stuff and your body isn't allowing you to keep on going. These are the 5 questions that I always ask to understand how much depleted, how much resilience you still have. With these 5 questions, we set the scene and I'm already having an idea how much depleted people are. But then we look into hard data. So the second area I look into is on wearable data. If people already have, or people already using some sort of wearable like a Whoop bracelet or Oura Ring, Ultra Human, or a Garmin, Apple Watch, I try to look into 2 markers: heart rate variability and resting heart rate. When you are on your path towards a burnout, heart rate variability will go down and resting heart rate will go up. There's a world of evidence showing that the closer you are to burnout, the lower the HRV will be. What is heart rate variability? Heart rate variability measures the difference in timing between consecutive heartbeats. So basically imagine that if you would be beating exactly like a clock at 60 beats per minute, the heart rate variability would be 0. What has been found is that the higher HRV the more balanced your system is, the more recovered and recharged the system is, because in terms of our autonomous nervous system, which has these two arms, the fight or flight and rest and digest, you are much more leaning towards the rest and digest rather than fight or flight. So overall, it works as a good proxy for how much stress you have in your system from any source, physical, mental, emotional, environmental. It is a very good marker. And wearing a wearable allows us to actually put numbers in things that we have no access to objective data. And I have a very good example on the impact that wearables have. A couple of years ago, I was doing a program for a company in Dubai, and one of the executives that was part of the program, one day I was looking into the data remotely, and I found a massive outlier, a massive positive outlier on the HRV, on his recovery level, and particularly the HRV. So I texted him saying, "Mate, what happened?" "Oh, no problem. It was probably a problem with the bracelet because it was a stupid long and hard day." I find it weird because the bracelet should not have mistakes. I say, "Well, no, we need to talk because we may have something here." We spent a full hour dissecting exactly what happened in that day. And it was indeed a crazy long day. He woke up in Qatar at 4 a.m., flew to Saudi at 6 a.m., spent 10 hours on a convention and doing meetings and being always speaking and selling and doing his art, let's say. Then he went to the lounge at the airport. He had dinner at lounge. He flew back to Abu Dhabi, where his home is, and he went to bed at 2 a.m. So it was a 22-hour day. And still, he was able to have massive recoveries. So he went detail by detail. Where were you? What you ate? What you drink? What were you doing? Especially in the first part of the day and the last part of the day. And what we found was that it did exactly everything by the book to improve his sleep and his recovery in terms of what he ate, what he did on the flight. He was not watching any screens. He was just listening to audiobook. And then when he went home to not disturb family, he went to the secondary room. It was super cold, super dark. And with that example, we were able to draft his own protocol to maximize his recovery, even in these crazy days. And then every time he had one of those crazy events, we were able to duplicate the recovery. And the only reason we were able to do it was because we had the data to show that we had something there. And that's the power of having a wearables, and why I'm a sucker for data and a sucker for wearables. And I've been wearing them for more than 6 years now, 7 years now. And I found fascinating the amount of actionable information we can have by just having these windows into our metabolism. So that's the second area. If people do not have a wearable, I discuss it and I kind of convince them that it's critical to have this 24/7 evaluation of how we are doing. So the second area of hard data that I look into would be regular blood markers. By regular blood markers, I refer to blood markers that we can do in any lab. When I want to evaluate if someone is burning out or how much resilience they still have, these are the 6 markers that I look into. First one is vitamin C. And vitamin C is very well known for its anti-inflammation and antioxidation powers, but it's also critical for the production of cortisol. The place in our body that we have the highest concentration of vitamin C is the adrenal glands, which are the glands that are responsible for the production of cortisol. And it's critical that we have enough vitamin C to have a perfectly optimized cortisol balance. Our ability to produce cortisol, to react to stress and to recover from it is highly dependent on the level of vitamin C that we have. So that is a very early flag for chronic stress and chronic depletion, if you want. The second marker that I look into is DHEA, particularly combined with the levels of cortisol. DHEA is a hormone that counterbalances the destructive power of cortisol. Cortisol, only concern it has is to make us survive. And if it has to break stuff along the way, couldn't care less, because the premise is if we survive, then we recover. DHEA is the thing that will allow us to counterbalance the destructive power of cortisol. And it starts to get lower with the chronic exposure to cortisol. So when we have chronically high levels of cortisol, even if they are normal in blood, if DHEA gets lower, it tells me that we've been having high cortisol for a while. It's a very easy way to understand for how long we've been having high levels of cortisol. Then speaking of hormones, testosterone as well. When we have chronically high levels of cortisol, we'll have lower levels of testosterone. And it helps to explain also why people on high levels of stress will have lower or will have a decreased ability to build muscle or keep their muscle, but also in their mind, they start to feel that their ability to go for a target and achieve it gets lowered. It can be caused by a low level of testosterone. These three markers, vitamin C, DHEA, and testosterone, will give me a direct picture on the cortisol exposure and the cortisol balance and the adrenal function. The other three tells me a story on the overall battery of our body. One of it is a high sensitive C-reactive protein. This is a very sensitive marker for inflammation. It will get higher for an infection, any significant inflammation, for any number of reasons. A marker that is still within the reference range, but higher than ideal. So anything between 1.0 milligrams per liter and 3 milligrams per liter will tell me there's a simmering inflammation going on, which is very typical of a chronically stressed system and chronically high levels of cortisol. The fourth will be insulin. Cortisol will increase the level of sugar in the blood. Just think, if you're running away from a lion, you want to have quick energy in your muscles to allow you the best chance to survive. But with chronically high spikes of cortisol, it will lead to a chronic high spikes of sugar in the blood, which then will lead to increased levels of insulin. So it's very, very common to see people having a higher than ideal level of insulin, a small insulin resistance, even if they take care of the diet and they do not have a high carb diet, but it's because of cortisol and whole stress level and not necessarily because of diet. And it helps to explain changes in the body composition, difficulty in lose weight, especially in men. And the last of the critical six would be homocysteine. Homocysteine is a marker for methylation, which you can see as some sort of process that activates and deactivates stuff in our body. It changes inversely to the amount of B vitamins that we have in our system. So if you have a higher than ideal level of homocysteine, we know for a fact that you don't have enough B vitamins in your system, and that may translate or may be a reason why your focus is impacted, your executive function is impacted, because B vitamins are critical for that as well. And so these are the six markers that you can check in your blood: vitamin C, DHEA, testosterone, C-reactive protein, insulin, and homocysteine. The last area that I want to get data to really understand how system is functioning is within the realm of precision medicine testing, especially saliva cortisol testing and urinary organic acid testing. On the saliva testing, it is the best way to really understand what is a circadian rhythm of cortisol of a person. Because especially in the morning, almost hour by hour, our value changes, especially in the first hour in the morning. It's called the cortisol awakening response. On an ideal system, between the moment you wake up and 30 minutes later, you should have a spike of at least 50% of your cortisol level. And then it starts to drop continuously throughout the day. It reaches a very low level around 6 p.m., around sunset time, but it keeps on lowering it. The lowest level will be around 4 a.m., and then we have another cycle coming. Doing multiple collections throughout the day allows me to really understand how abnormal the cortisol curve is, and whether or not we have the cortisol awakening response still intact, or we have it reduced, but the whole system is having high levels of cortisol, because it will change some strategies that we can implement in a system. And these combined with the level of DHEA will really give us a lot of precision and detail into the system. The organic acid testing, then, is the ultimate precision medicine testing in this picture. Urinary organic acids are things that we can measure in the urine that are almost as byproducts of some processes in our body. And by measuring them, we have an idea on how that process is going. And it helps to really understand a couple of things that are crucial, particularly the levels of adrenaline, dopamine, serotonin. It helps to understand the brain chemistry. Also, how the citric acid cycle is working, which is the place in our body that we literally produce ATP and energy. And finally, how much damage our cells are having, our DNA is having. By looking into these areas, it's possible to have a good idea on how the brain is functioning, how the mitochondria and the cells are producing energy, and how much damage we have been suffering. Now, taking a step back and looking into the 4 areas with the questions, we have a subjective evaluation on how good the person is doing. Then wearables and health tech with HRV and resting heart rate. It's a continuous monitor on the balance of stress and recovery and how much load and pressure the system is having. We have regular blood markers that we can do in any lab that will give us a good idea on the level of resilience, metabolic resilience, hormonal balance, and how much power we still have in our adrenals to keep on functioning and producing cortisol. And then we go into the precision medicine area with saliva testing and urinary acids testing. Then we really understand how depleted and how close to burnout a system is, which then allows us to really create a good protocol for that person. When we combine all this data, it becomes clearer and clearer that a burnout is not a mental health issue, it's a metabolic issue that is the result of pushing without replenishing, of using our battery without recharging. And it becomes clear what the path is. It's not telling someone that you have a stress problem. It's not telling someone to just rest, take a break. It's really, really, really about supporting the system, improving the metabolic resilience, making sure that that person has enough juice, enough battery to keep on going, pursuing their goals and their dreams. And again, if you want to have access to the strategies that I usually deploy with my clients, you can go to primehumanperformance.com/stress protocol to have access to my Prime Stress Protocol ebook. And thanks so much for listening. I hope to see you in the next one.